Hey everyone, and welcome back to Her Side of the Ruck. I am Bernice,
I'm Tash.
and we are not pundits.
We're just two women who know what a ruck is.
So, on this week's episode, we will be discussing all things international rugby. So, we saw that the British and Irish Lions played the Western Force, so kicking off their tour in Australia, followed by the South African game. They played the Barbarians for the first time on the home soil. And then we have a nice surprise at the end, which we can't wait to share. Let's dive into it. Okay, so starting off, we had the British and Irish Lions match against the Western Force. Now, it's very funny that both of the matches had the exact same score,
Yeah.
54-7 on both ends. So yeah, Tash, what did you make of that match? What were your thoughts?
I think let's start off with saying the Western Force are not at the top of Super Rugby in the Southern Hemisphere. I don't think they played badly, but when you've got the caliber of talent that you've got in the Lions, given that all of the team are now there, they've been training together, they've been bonding together a lot more. A lot of the things started to come together, particularly in that second half. That first half, I think, was still a little bit rusty, even though there were lovely moments of magic. Like for the first try, Dan Sheehan's first try in captain the squad, I thought he did a great job leading the team. And Dan Sheehan as well, I just say as a hooker, he is very different to what a traditional hooker is. And we see him score time and time again for Ireland. So it was great to see him score in a British and Irish Lions jersey, but also step up as captain with Marrow not being in the squad that week. So, but Finn Russell, pinpoint precision on the kick, lovely offload from James Lowe. Again, I talk very positively about James Lowe quite a lot, but for good reason. He was just really solid. That first try was great. Obviously, conceding very quickly after that first try, Western Force kind of go in, but they don't score again. And to get plus 50 points in your first, I suppose, second match, first official match, is very impressive, regardless of what team it is against. But I thought the attacking phases of play were a lot smoother. There's definitely still things to work out, and Farrell's clearly testing out different combinations and working out what utility players he wants on the bench to then come in onto the field, whether it's at 50, 60 minutes or if it's as injury cover. So there's definitely still a couple of things that are being worked out, but it's really exciting. And I feel really confident continuing on this tour, and I do think they will beat the Wallabies 2-1, hopefully 3-0, but we will see. Unfortunate about Thomas Williams. I thought he played fairly well, but now he's been ruled out with a hamstring injury, and another Scot, Ben White, has come into the squad. So there's been a lot of coverage around that in the media. So really great for Ben White. Great in terms of passing, speed of ball for Scotland. So I think he's exactly the scrum half that Farrell is looking for. And Williams has had a very good season in the Gallagher Prem, so I can understand in the original squad why Farrell picked him over Ben White. But I think a lot of Scottish fans will be very glad to see Ben White going down to the Southern Hemisphere ahead of the rest of the matches. But yeah, I still think there's a lot of things to flesh out, but there was definitely some players that shone, and I am going to jump on the Henry Pollock hype train because whilst he might not be the best at everything else, when he's got the ball and wants to run it, he's going to score, or he's going to set someone else up for score. And there's been so many other people in the world of rugby talking about this exact thing and what Henry's so good at doing. So at 20 years of age, he seems to have really embraced all of the atmospheres and carrying Bill around with him. I think Bundy Aki put him up to do a live, and because I saw a screenshot of when Henry was holding Bill doing a live, and his face is very close to his phone, and you've got Bundy Aki commenting 20 minutes left or 20 minutes to go, and I just think that's so funny. And in the coverage, I mean, I think Pollock's kind of latched on a lot to Aki and Sione Tuipulotu. There's been a lot of behind the scenes content of them all interacting together, and that's so nice to see, and really positive for the Lions, and also really positive for English rugby too.
Yeah, no, definitely. And just on the Henry Pollock thing, I just love that chip kick of his. Like, I thought that
So
was
good.
brilliant for an eight man. So that was amazing to see. And definitely, like, it seems like there's such a good vibe in the camp, and
Mm,
like, obviously, they haven't gone to the actual test, but I think it's good for team building, and it's good to build those connections, like outside of the actual matches. Like, you do need those connections, so it's great to see. And I think overall, it was a good game for the British and
mm,
Irish Lions. They did perform better than they did in the first match. Obviously, they didn't go on to get a win, but I felt like a few of the things that they needed to sort out, like, was actually they did work on that. Like, the lineouts were a lot better in this
mm,
match. Yeah, so I think obviously it's not a perfect performance, but seeing like I do feel they have improved from like the Argentina match to this match. It felt like they were a little more cohesive
mhm,
compared to the Argentina match, which was also great to see. It is very sad about Thomas Williams. I thought he had a very good match until he had to go off with the injury. So it's very bad. I think like you look forward to playing for the British and Irish Lions, and then you have to go off with an injury. So yeah, it's like you have to feel for him. But I thought the Lions support play was like so great in that
mhm.
match. The Western Force started off really strong and they scored a quick try. And then you kind of felt like, oh, okay, like they're gonna give them a run for their money. But I just think the Lions, the pace of the match was just like too quick for the Force to keep up with, and
Mhm.
it's difficult to keep up with that pace. But yeah, no, I think the discipline of the Lions can be improved. But it might also be just a little bit of over eagerness, like everyone wants to make
Yes.
their mark, and everyone wants to show why they deserve a spot in the Lions team. So I don't think it's something to worry too much about. But yeah, overall, I think the Lions can be happy with the performance.
Yeah, and as you said, Bernice, like that relationship off the field in training, it's just time when they're not training, just being together will hopefully create greater relationships on the field. And I do think we're starting to see the progression of that. And that is the unique thing about the British and Irish Lions tour. When you're with your own country, you're with the players against them a lot when it comes to club
Mhm.
league, but also you're together when it comes to, well, in the Northern Hemisphere, men's Six Nations, World Cups, Autumn Nations, summer tests. And then if you're a Southern Hemisphere team, you've got the Rugby Championship and all those different other competitions. So again, I think it's really positive. And yet it's this eagerness. They need to be able to control it so it's not over eager, so it doesn't slip over into, as you say, discipline errors. However, I think that's a really positive energy that Andy Farrell can channel going ahead into the rest of the matches. So that's really exciting. Moving on, you're wearing your new Springboks jacket, I can see.
Yeah, no, obviously beaming because it's Springbok season. Like, I just feel like the whole of South Africa are just like so happy that it's Springbok season finally. But yeah, I think the match over the weekend, Springboks versus Barbarians, it wasn't the perfect conditions to play in. Obviously, Cape Town in winters, there's always a chance for it to be cold and wet conditions, and unfortunately, it was one of those days. But yeah, I think overall the Springboks did pretty well in the conditions. I think they handled the conditions pretty well. There were a few errors in the start of the match, but overall, I thought the Springboks looked very sharp from the get-go. Like, it didn't feel like it was the first match of the season. And obviously, Rassie did include a few new players like Asanati, Chatuka. I thought all of the debutants were quite solid in their performances. I think Chatuka had a great match. He took a few line-out balls, he scored 2 tries. And yeah, I think Fassi and Jason Colby were great under the high ball.
So
Yeah, it was
good.
just very good to see them back in action. But yeah, I thought they were brilliant under the high ball. So that was great to see. Yeah, I think it was a solid performance. Obviously, it is the first match of the season, so there were a few errors, but yeah, I think overall a good performance from most of the Springbok players. And yeah, it's good to see some new blood coming in. So yeah, I'm sure Rassi will be testing out a few combinations throughout the first part of the season. So against Georgia, against Italy. So it will be good to see what the mixture of player will be. But it was also good to see Luet back in the squad. He played like he never left. Like I can't believe he haven't played for so many months. So it was good to see him back in the squad. On the Barbarian side of things, it felt like they almost didn't really fire a shot. It
Mm,
wasn't the performance that I expected from them. I know obviously they've been training together for like 2 training sessions, but there's
of
a lot of
course.
hype around the Barbarians and you expect a lot. But that being said, there was also a very sweet gesture from Peter O'Mahony gifting a Barbarians jersey to the Cornell Hendricks family just
Oh,
before the anthem, which I thought was very sweet. And that's why we
mm.
love to see the Barbarians game and like we watch it for more than rugby. So yeah, it was very good to see. I don't know what your thoughts were on the match, Tash.
Barbarians, I think, were showing their age at times. Colby was amazing. Like there were so many times like his actions made the highlights because they were just so good. And there were times when he just broke away either from a great pass or he chipped and kicked and followed it through. And it was perfect placement, just really quick and fast. And the Barbarians just kind of went, nah, he's gone. Like he's too quick. So I do think they were maybe showing their age a little bit in terms of lack of gas. And I think that was also a nice thing to see from the Springboks as well. The opposite thing, that they did have the gas. Because I suppose when I've often watched the Springboks play, which is typically in World Cup years and often against the All Blacks or England, and the Springboks will find a way to win. That you don't win 2 World Cups back to back without digging in deep and finding a way to win. But you normally see it won in the forwards rather than in the backs. Okay, yeah, Andre Pollard, the Iceman, when he's in a Springbok shirt, he's ice cool, will just kick and convert. But often, a lot of those penalties are drawn from the actions of the forwards. So it was really nice to see that the Springboks were doing a bit of both, actually. They were relying on their back line, but also being tough and hard like they normally do with their forwards. Like quite a lot of the opening tries did come from a driving maul, and which is what part of the Springboks DNA. So it's good to see a mixture in both. I think if they get tested by a more competitive international side, we may see the Springboks revert to the more traditional style by using the strength and depth that they have in that forward pack. Because if you look at them, like the amount of forwards that get produced from South Africa is just obscene. Like it creates envy in any rugby nation with how well South Africa produces forwards. Then it's just kind of like, are they just going to rely on the power game and the bomb squad to come on from the bench, or is Rassie planning? Has he got different plans? I mean, I remember when we had a talk from Renee Naylor, who was a Springboks physio for a very long time, and she talked about Rassie's clock. And Rassie works to a clock of what games come at what times and how it all kind of works towards the peak, the 12 o'clock of the World Cup, which I suppose is the prime time for any rugby nation. They are always working towards a World Cup. So that was really fascinating. And everything that he does will be meticulously planned, will form part of the game plan leading up to 2027, the next World Cup for the men. So, yeah, I think there were some really exciting things. I mean, the Springboks outclassed the Barbarians, so they deserve to win. I also thought Manny Lebok played with a lot more confidence, particularly in his kicking game. There are times when I've watched him both at club and international level where he's missed kicks, not because I don't think it's to do with a lack of skill. I think it's to do with belief. And I felt that he was a lot more self-assured and had a lot more belief in that game, which is really positive to see, because you don't want a 10 to not play very well, particularly if that's your 10. So I thought he played with a lot more confidence. And yeah, great that Rassie's bringing in or staggering in new players and with the experience, because the last thing you want to do is a lot of your players retire and then it's like, oh right, you have to start from scratch again, which I think is very much what happened to the Wales squad, where a lot of their old guard retired all at once and then you have to start from scratch. And that's where a couple of their issues have come from, amongst other things. So I think it's really exciting. I am looking forward to watching the Springboks play. I don't think they'll have any issues against Italy and Georgia personally, although I do think Italy have improved massively in the past 3 years in their men's team. But personally, I don't see the Springboks losing any of their summer fixtures.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see, especially against Italy and Georgia. And I think Rassie would make Rassie would kind of use that time to test combinations and to bring in some of the new guys, but also to give some of the more experienced players a little bit of game time in the build up to the rugby championship. So it would be interesting to see kind of what combinations he'd be testing out. But I was really happy for Mani to see how well he performed in terms of kicking. I really hope that that can be consistent throughout the season, like when he does get a chance, because I've always thought that Mani is a really good player, but ultimately you do need a 10 to be able to put over those kicks. But yeah, I just think Mani is a really good player, and he if he can be consistent with that, then I really think he can turn into a great player. But yeah, I think overall a very good performance by the Springboks. I've seen some people online say, but it was only the Barbarians, and but I know how South Africans are. So you'll either be you'll either say no, but we could have won them like with more points, or you'd be like, if we only win them with like 12 points, you'd say, oh no, but it's only the Barbarians and we won them with only 12 points, like now we're in trouble. So either way, you can't win. You play the cards that you've been dealt with. So I
Mm.
think, either way, it was a good performance. But I think you touched on depth of
Mm.
squads and just teams in general. And I think it's so important to develop players and to bring in new players, not all at once, but to just like one or two players in every match, just to keep that going and to keep that momentum going. I think one thing that Rassie really likes is a player that can play more than one position. And
Yes.
we've seen it with a few players. So we've seen it with Chaselin and we've seen it with a lot of players. But I think this weekend we saw Rassie again using a backline player as a forward player when he used Andre Esterhuizen as a flanker.
Mm.
So I don't know what your thoughts are in terms of depth and developing players.
I do think there will be a trend in the coming years and players coming up through academies and through their clubs that you don't just play one position. Apart from if you're a hooker, scrum half, fly half, and even then, there's quite a lot of clubs who have signed players who can play fly halves but also play 12, like Farrell, Owen Farrell, for example, classically could do that shift, and a combination that England relied on a lot. He would start at 10, then move to 12 when George Ford came on, and both of them offer something different. I think that Farrell is a better 12 than a 10, personally,
Mm,
because I
mm,
think I rate George Ford. I really rate George Ford. And I'm glad that he's getting to co-captain England because he truly deserves it and is just a top class bloke. So I do think we'll see a transition to tens either being able to play centre or fullback, a bit like Marcus Smith, although I voiced my opinion on how I think Smith is as a fullback. I think he's a better 10, personally. I think international sides will start to move towards that, having players who can play one to two positions. And if you're a second rower, you can interchange between 4 and 5. If you're a back rower, interchange between 7 and 8. Ben Earl's a good example, plays for
mm,
Saracens, but also with the British and Irish Lions. He can play 7 and 8. Pollock is the same. He can play 7 and 8. So I think we will see a transition to players having greater versatility, because if you can't just say, oh, I can just play left wing, like that
mm,
limits your options so much, whether that's international rugby or whether that's club rugby, or even getting to play at a top club, because rugby jobs don't come easy these days. To be able to play at a top class club, you need to offer a lot and be able to develop and change. And if that is to add something else to your tick list of skills, i.e., moving positions, I think that will, I suppose, it makes you more marketable as a player and more ideal, I guess, for different teams. So yeah, I do think Razzie is definitely leaning towards that more, typically with how we see his bench split with a 6-2 or 7-1 split, bringing on that bomb squad of the forwards. And as I mentioned, when I've watched South Africa play, they are using those forwards. So if you can have someone interchange in the back line, can play any sort of position, but you're winning most of your penalties and your points off scrums, line outs, driving mauls, then your backline isn't as important as I think with how other teams play, like France, for example. They are really big up front, I would say not as much as South Africa. But when you've got Biel Barre, Dupont when he's on fire, Luku, I mean, France have an array of scrum halves, which are just fantastic at the minute. A lot of their magic has come from the back line. But again, we saw in the Men's Six Nations this year that there was, I guess, an experiment with that 7-1 split, and it kind of did work. So I don't think the 7-1 split will become the norm. No way. I still think 5-3-6-2 will be the norm, forwards to backs. However, I do think we will see a lot more backs coming through the systems in the next few years who can play multiple positions. Now, at the same time, we've seen Sione Tuipulotu play at 13 when he played against Argentina. But for me, Sione is an out-and-out 12. He is better when he's in the centre line. He's not as good when he's coming off the wing. I'm not saying he's bad. Like, he's an excellent player, but he's better when he's an out-and-out 12. Hugh Jones is better when he's an out-and-out 13, particularly in that Huey-Pilotu combination. However, they can play both if they need to. I think it will become the norm that if you can play inside centre, you can play outside centre. And if you can play a position in the back row, you can play any of them.
I think especially like you said with the benches, you can see in terms of how teams are planning their match day squad, like you can definitely see that becoming a factor to consider, like, okay, we can use this player as a lock and as an eighth man and as a back rower. So I also don't think it would become the norm to use a 7-1 bench, but I do think that utility players will definitely become the norm. Like, if you can play more than one position, it just makes you such a versatile player, and it just opens up so many doors for you. And I think as long as you're also willing to put yourself in that position to try and learn to play a different position, that's also great. So we've seen, for example, Marco van Staden play hooker when he needed to, and that also helps a lot when you do get injuries in a match and you're short at a position, then you can just bring in that player. And obviously that player wouldn't necessarily be the equivalent to a Malcolm Marx or so, but if you can do the job, then why not?
Exactly.
So, and you've seen it with Henry Pollock as well. He's now plays eighth man, which is great to see. So it's so good to see, and especially at such a young age. So I think if he plays different positions throughout his career, he's going to be a very good utility back. So Tash and I are both on the Henry Pollock train.
Absolutely. The Henry Pollock hype train is real. And you make a good point about the injuries there, Bernice, because rugby union is so physical. Like, I mean, it's always been such a physical game, but now these guys are all-round athletes. They are huge men who are hitting each other at a ridiculous force, having to get up and go again. And I think in the past 10 years, there's been this gradual shift towards the blitz defense. And that fitness doesn't come from anywhere. It comes from really hard work. So to be this all-round athlete where you've got so much body armor that protects you from being tackled, whilst being able to effectively sprint a couple of yards, then run back, then run forward again, the fitness is crazy. I mean, I did a Bronco once and it was hard. So I can't imagine what it's like being tackled to the floor to get up again and then go hit somebody else. So rugby union is so physical. Injuries are going to happen, even if things are conducted as safely as possible. They are just going to happen. It's a contact sport. So it makes sense that coaches of whatever team that they coach at club or international level will be looking to shift towards utility players for that reason. We don't have a moment of the week this week, because normally our moment of the weeks are kind of heartfelt, nice moments. But we did see something which we thought was very amusing. It was a graphic produced by Ball Carrier. I'll put it on the screen for you. And basically, it's a picture of Matt Hansen, who's a Connacht player, so team in the URC, in his Lions shirt, and a tweet or X post from Will Kelleher, who is a Times journalist. So this is a UK newspaper. And Will wrote on X, the Western Force announcer here going through the Lions 23, ... Quotes from the announcer. Our former Aussie, Matt Hansen. Another former Aussie, Sione Tuipulotu. It's the Kiwi, now Irishman, James Lowe. The former SA schoolboy, now Scotsman, Pierre Schumann. I thought this was funny. I think other people didn't think it was funny. I read through the comments, and we've already spoken about in the past about people arguing in comment sections in previous episodes. We personally invite it because it creates engagement around the game and it's funny, I think. But some people went, "This is a tasteless comment from the Western Force announcer," and some people went, "But it's true." Like, now I have two perspectives when it comes to something like
Mm-hmm.
this. My first one is, in the Northern Hemisphere, we have lots of immigration, loads and loads and loads. And also because of history, I'm not going to go too deep into it. Northern Hemisphere countries, well, we kind of spread out and like to take people's land in the past. And so historically, there's a lot of Scots, English, and Irish and Welsh kind of scattered around the Southern Hemisphere. So hereditary, a lot of these players have Northern Hemisphere heritage, which either enables them to qualify for their respective Northern Hemisphere teams, or because they play for a URC Gallagher Prem or a Gallagher Prem team, they qualify to represent their country through residency, which we've seen that through Tom Jordan, for example, who has moved from Glasgow Warriors to Bristol Bears ahead of this season, but plays for Scotland, but born in New Zealand, for example. So I don't see an issue with it, because why do we not celebrate multiculturalism and immigration when you've got these players who have chosen to move to the Northern Hemisphere for whatever reason? Maybe they chose because of rugby, maybe they chose to move because of family, who knows? But just because they weren't necessarily born in that country doesn't mean that they shouldn't be allowed to represent a country that they've chosen to live in. That's one opinion that I have. The other view that I have is, we countries shouldn't just rely on foreign born players to make up their squads, because you need to be able to produce homegrown players through academy systems. And some countries are better at doing that than others. I think Leinster are very, very good at producing home-based players, and their academy system is excellent. I work with quite a few Irish S&C coaches who all started their careers off at Leinster, either as a player and then didn't make the senior team and then decided they were going to go into S&C, or they were in and around the Leinster circuit, got an internship with Leinster, and then have found full-time work at other clubs. You also have traditional academy systems at big English clubs like Northampton Saints. Henry Pollock, Tommy Freeman are both examples, British and Irish Lions, who came through the Northampton Saints academy system. Ollie Chesham, for example, British and Irish Lion, came through the Leicester Tigers system, was on loan at Nottingham Rugby, who are a championship team, and then come back to Tigers, gets into the England team, and is now a Lion. So there are instances where homegrown players are happening. It just needs to come through solid academies. Having a mixture between foreign born players who have proven themselves at Northern Hemisphere clubs to represent a country, I don't have an issue with that personally. However, we can't just have full squads of international born players and rely on that when you're not relying on developing talent at home. I do think unions are realizing this and are making sure that they don't rely on foreign born players going forward. We're seeing that with some of the changes with the SRU. We're seeing that with changes in England's pathway as well. I can't speak too much about other countries and their pathways because I'm not as knowledgeable about that. However, there is that trend towards, we can't just rely on people born abroad. But I thought this comment was funny. It's an interesting piece of content. Like, I personally don't have an issue with it, but I know that some people do.
Yeah, and I think people, so for example, the Aussie that made the comment, I think people love claiming players. So if a team
Yes.
performs well, then they'll just be like, oh yeah, it's because he's an Aussie. So we do that as a bit of like rugby banter as well. So if Scotland performs well, because and say, for example, Glasgow Warriors, so they have Franco Smith and they have Kyle Steyn and everyone. So you like saying, yeah, but basically South Africa won because, so it's like, so people just like love claiming their players as well, especially when teams perform well. They just love saying, that's our player. He's
Mm.
originally from, so you can't actually say he's an Irishman or whatever. But I do think that it is important to develop players. I think there's a space for both in rugby. I think if, for example, if you take Duan van der Merwe and Pierre Schoeman, so they didn't really get to make a career out of their rugby here, like in South Africa. So why not go there if you have relatives there and
Yeah.
actually make a career out of your rugby, if that's your passion and if that's what you want to do. So people will always complain, and I think people
Yes.
will have their opinions on it. And I think some people find it funny, like you've seen in the comments, some people would take it very seriously. But yeah, I do think there's a place for both. Sometimes also in South Africa, we feel like when you look at clubs and clubs go and buy all the players, or they bring all the players back from Japan or from France, wherever place they've played currently, then we also feel like, oh, but why are you bringing all the players back into the mix when you have these academies? So almost all
Mm,
of the South African teams have academies. So there is the VP Rugby Academy, there is the Blue Bulls, like every club has academies. So then you kind of go, okay, but why don't you just take players from there? So I think as long as you find a balance and you don't look at a squad and you're like, okay, but that's mainly players that are not within the union, then I think it's probably not great. Yeah, I think people will have a lot to say, and I think it's funny. I think it's a very funny comment that was made. But yeah, let us know what your thoughts are. What do you think about players that are from other countries? Drop it down below in the comments. We want to hear your thoughts. And so before we go, I just want to say that Tash has some very exciting news to share with us. And before she shares it, I want to congratulate her already. But yeah, Tash, please share with us. I think people have been waiting for this. So go for it.
First of all, thank you, Bernice. I'm really excited to share that I will be moving back into rugby full time as of August the 4th. I will be joining English Championship and PWR team Ealing Trailfinders. They are current championship winners and they've got an excellent PWR squad. They've made a lot of moves by signing some excellent internationals. So joining as the media executive, I'm going to be a West London girly, and this girl from the Midlands did not think that that would ever happen. So, yeah, super excited. I know where we're going to make an impact. So, if you're interested in seeing some of their content, seeing my journey, either give us a follow in all of our links down below, and also give Ealing Trailfinders a follow because they are a fantastic club, and I cannot wait to work there. So, yeah, super excited.
Yeah, we can't wait to see. And obviously, we know that you're going to be amazing. You have worked in media before. So I think we can't wait to follow your journey. And yeah, obviously, just being back into rugby is such an amazing thing. And obviously, what you love doing. So, so great to see.
We've got a busy few weeks ahead of international rugby. However, we're going to take a pause on the pod for the next fortnight just because I'm heading away for a well deserved break. But we will still be doing plenty of social media coverage on TikTok and Instagram. So please check out our links in the description below. We'll be posting on TikTok and Instagram regularly, vlogs, all that kind of stuff. We're going to do a couple of kit reviews as well. The England jersey is out, the Springbok jersey is out. So me and Bernice are going to do side-by-side reviews of each other's home nation's jerseys. So stay tuned for content like that. But we will be back in the middle of July with plenty more episodes with lots of exciting rugby news. But for now, thank you so much for watching another episode of Her Side of the Ruck. We'll be back with you again very soon. Signing off in the UK is me, Tash.
Signing off from South Africa is Bernice.
Thank you so much for watching. Bye.
Bye, guys.